Who here thinks, covertly or overtly, they're the biggest nerd in the room? One proud nerd, that's it? What are you guys even doing? This is a technology conference. This should be a room full of nerds. Anyone who used Whova, I looked you up before you came in here, and I know you're a nerd and you're afraid to raise your hand. I am here to tell you today that I am going to be delivering an extremely nerdy topic. So if you are not already a nerd, you will be one by the time we wrap up here. You'll be all psyched up for Ian Gotts, who is going to be charismatic and not at all a nerd. I am so pleased to tell you that while I was prepping for this session, I dug really deep into EBSCOhost. Does anybody else spend their Saturday nights digging into EBSCOhost? No? All right, you guys are all a lot cooler than me. We've established that. Welcome, I'm Dr. Shannon Gregg, and I spend my spare time doing extremely nerdy things, like reading about how and why people don't adopt technology. Now, I can tell you there's just not a lot of research on this topic because there is not one single technology application provider alive who wants to admit that their users have a hard time adopting their technology, because that doesn't sell seat licenses. So I set out to do research on this myself. So I said, when I'm gonna go talk to this group of nerds who are gonna never admit that they're nerds, except for just one of you, my bud, I typed in AI change management, and there were less than 5,000 peer-reviewed articles on AI change management. So we've got here not that many articles, but something that I found was really fascinating is, and I don't know if you can see how tiny this is. If your eyes are as old as mine, you probably can't. But running down the left-hand side, you can see I've got numbers 1, 2, and 3. So when I typed in AI change management, these were the first 3 things that came out. The role of change management in Morocco's public sector. AI artifacts in engineering change management. Project management leadership. Does AI change my role? Starting to sound a little human, yeah? When you get into 4, 5, and 6, these are all based around things that humans are feeling about AI. AI can't steal my soul. How many times do you mutter that while you're in the shower? But I'm here to tell you, 75% of corporate AI initiatives fail, according to research that was done and then posted in fortune.com by Nada Sanders. So we're going to quickly run through this agenda. We're going to talk about the aspects of change, we'll talk about user adoption, and then we will talk about learning and innovation. Because, as you saw in the research, the biggest challenges that we have are indeed the humans. So first, let's talk about the aspects of change. Has anybody seen this type of picture before, heard this parable? Okay, I see some people shaking their head no. Thank you so much for that. So let me tell you about this. A teacher took these mason jars and put them in front of the classroom and put a bunch of rocks in and said, now is that jar full? And several students said yes, that jar looks full. And the teacher said, okay, well now I'm gonna put some sand inside of this jar. And you can see it's filling in the spaces that the rocks were not occupying. Now do you think this jar is full? And the student said, yes, absolutely, this jar is full. And the teacher said, now, how could we make this jar even more full? And students thought of different ways to fill it, that you could put water in there, you could take the rocks out, put the sand in first. And I think this parable is really helpful as we're starting to think about how to improve AI adoption, because every organization, every department is in a different space. So there are generally 3 different places that the organization or department might be in. And that may be that they are building on their capacity and capabilities. It may be that they are expanding their capacity and capabilities, and they may be in strengthening their capacity and capabilities. So as you're thinking about AI initiatives, this applies to any initiative, but specifically as you're thinking about AI, most people started with generative AI. In fact, when ChatGPT hit the circuit, people started losing their minds. They were so excited. They were never going to have to think again. They could just ask ChatGPT to write all of their blogs. And content marketers started sweating. They were the first ones, right? Oh no, I've been writing communications for so many years, and now ChatGPT can do it. And so generative AI became something that people started to understand. And as they started thinking about the way that AI could represent something different, agents, next best choice, it started to move from that build to the expand to the strengthen piece. So if you think about your organization or an organization that you're working with, I want you to start to think about where they are in that place. Where are you in that place in something that is really narrow, so that you can apply that as we're listening for the rest of our time together, because it will help you to build this picture in your mind so that you know where you are. Are you in build? Are you in expand? Are you in strengthen? So as we're thinking about change, and only a few of you raised your hand and said you were change management experts, there are a couple of major philosophies around change, and I will tell you organizational studies only really began in the 60s. So researchers didn't start looking at the way organizations, people work together until the 60s. And that means a lot of the research that we're still basing our ideas on are that old, because organizations and people generally haven't changed that much. As humans, we love to take the path of least resistance, right? We like to follow just like we're little neurons, and how quickly do we get to the place we want to go, right? Is anybody driven ever to a family vacation? Okay. Do you ever say, you know what, it takes us 12 hours to drive to Myrtle Beach, but what I think we'll do is pull off in Virginia and have a 2.5-hour lunch? Only Nicholas, but that makes sense to me. Everybody else is like, we got to get there as fast as possible, because we're going to have to unpack all of our stuff and, get our feet on the beach. So when you think about humans, that they don't act any differently inside of their organizations. In fact, they're even more steadfast in holding to the way they've always done it, because it has worked for them. And no one wants to look silly at work. So when you're thinking about AI adoption and how you can affect change, the technology acceptance model is a really nice framework to think about as you're considering the way that you're going to be rolling out any implementation, integration, or new initiative. So there will be external factors. And you saw on that second slide that humans now are fearful. People are afraid. They are anxious about change. So understand that they are bringing this concept to your initiative. You're pumped up about it. You've been thinking about it for 6, 9, 12 months. Once they find out about it, the first thing they think is, am I going to lose my job? Is my job going to be different? And so when you think about that as an external factor, we now are finding that the change management requirements for AI are even deeper than they were if you were rolling out a major system like a new CRM or ERP, because there's fear introduced now. And fear is one of the hardest human emotions to deal with when you are trying to roll out a new technology application. That's really challenging. So these things that are here that I think are really critical, and if you're the type of person that loves to take pictures of slides, please feel free to do that. Perceived usefulness is going to be one of the first things that your users want to know when they're thinking about, does this work for me? Is this something that I want to do? So perceived usefulness is the part where they're asking, what's in it for me? Why do I have to do this thing? Why do I have to learn a new thing that I have to log into, changing the way that I had to work when I accepted the job to work for this company? And then the next one is perceived ease of use. Who here is an iPhone person? All right, so many people, that's great. One of the things that was really critical for the people who developed the iPhone is you open that box up, you pull that phone out, and you start using it. You didn't need an iPhone expert to come sit down next to you. Well, maybe some of you did. My mother-in-law certainly does. But most people can open the iPhone, start using it because it makes sense. It's easy to use. It follows the way that you think it should. So when you turn it on, you understand exactly how to make it work. So the easier something is to use, the more of a chance that your users are going to use it. That then carries into intention to use. And I know I have asked this question. I see some people that I've seen before at this amazing event, but who here has ever joined the gym in January? Yeah, and who was still at the gym in February? Yeah, just one person. Oh my gosh, wow. You guys don't read, you don't go to the gym, what do you do? But the general idea, and academically it doesn't prove out, but it does to humans, is that it takes 21 days for something to stick. So if you give this giant big training and say, here's our new AI thing, and people don't use it every single day, their intention to use starts to diminish. And you know what happens next? They build a wall. They start to say, actually, I don't like this thing. It doesn't help. It's terrible. We wasted money on it, and that's a really easy train for them to get their friends and coworkers on. So as you're thinking about this, as you think about what is that perceived usefulness and that ease of use, and how do I make sure that my change management approach allows them to continue to say, I really, really want to use this thing. And that will help to develop their attitude to using. Because once you've lost somebody to the dark side, where they say, AI agents, boo, that's only great for restaurants and hotels, it's really hard to bring them back. So thinking about change ahead of time, really critical in your AI initiatives. Now, only a few of you raised your hand and said you were change management people. So those of you that aren't, I want to talk to you about Cotter. A lot of times people will use very simple change management frameworks, but Cotter's is really great for complicated, complex rollouts like an AI initiative might be. There are 8 sort of steps that Cotter will take you through that say, this is what makes sense, and this is the way to get people involved and invested. Now remember, organizational change management, all of the seminal works took place before pretty much everybody in this room was born, but these things still apply because humans just haven't changed that much. So there are 3 sort of major impact areas, and that is creating the climate for change. We're going to talk in a couple of minutes about how you can do that. Engaging and enabling the whole organization, which no one person can do alone. If you've ever tried to say like, hey guys, here's something we're all going to do together, even if you do it in a friend group, you're never going to get everybody to agree. So being systematic about how you can gain that is going to really help your change management impact. And then finally, how do you implement and sustain the change? Because only one of you raised the hand and said, yes, I was still going to the gym in February. So making sure that everybody is still making sure that is a part of their daily practice is critical. So what's a really great way to do this? That is finding quick wins. Who here knows and uses quick wins as one of their approaches? Yeah, good, thank goodness gracious. That is one of the best ways to get people to change, when you become your own PR agency and say, we did this, here was the impact. We made this small change, we found that our sales team was able to close deals 20% faster. We made this small change, we found that marketing qualified leads were able to convert more quickly at a rate of 1.7x. So being able to find those quick wins and push them out is a really great way to help navigate that area when you're thinking about change management. So these steps are going to be super, super helpful whenever you are thinking about, how do I push change? Because you have to push that change so that you can get to the utopia of user adoption. So there have only been 3 studies on AI-enabled CRM user adoption, and 2 of them were only completed 5 months ago. That's how nascent this is as an academic field. So I want to talk to you about all 3 of them because I think they're helpful when you're thinking about the ways that you can use change management strategies to make sure that your initiatives really stick. The first one is Disjourney, and this one I really enjoyed because they are talking about AI integrated CRM systems in the healthcare sector. This is really helpful because if anybody works in healthcare, you know it's a heavily regulated industry. So as you're thinking about my AI initiatives, you've got a laundry list of things that you have to make sure that you're taking care of as you're rolling into that. So in this particular study, which I did read on a Saturday night, you guys, I told you I was a nerd and I was not kidding, they used a hybrid fuzzy decision-making approach. So there's no instrument or assessment that can go out and say, are you adopting this thing? Are you adopting Salesforce? Are you adopting NetSuite? There isn't a psychometrically validated instrument that will assess that information. It would be really challenging to do that. So there are different ways that researchers are trying to get that information, and I'm going to tell all of you what the TLDR is for every one of these, since there's only 2 of you that claim to be nerds in this room. This particular study was done by an industrial engineer, and in fact, the 3 studies that I will show you, all 3 of those studies were done by industrial engineers. That is really fascinating because all of the previous user adoption studies have been done by people who are either in psychology or IT. So it's wild that industrial engineers are trying to dip their toes in our sand here, you guys, but they are coming for us. They are really interested in what's happening with the AI developed applications that they are trying to roll out there. So Disjurdy used something that is a fairly common, really academic framework to establish whether or not people would adopt AI developed CRM. And they looked at human, which you saw from slide 2 is the #1 thing that is popping up in research. They looked at technology, trying to understand compatibility, relative advantage. They looked at the environment, so understanding, is there policy, are there regulations, what is the organizational culture like? They looked at the organization, so they looked at size of hospitals, what their infrastructure looked like, and then of course they looked at cost, because everyone's always going to look at cost. And you saw on slide 3 that 75% of AI initiatives are predicted to fail. So cost is really critical, and projecting ROI is as well. So using this framework, Disjurdy went out and did the research, and they found that top management support was the most critical variable in the human dimension, and that of all 5 of these, the human dimension was the most critical thing that determined whether or not the AI-enabled CRM initiative would work. Does that surprise anybody? It's no different than when we were looking at any other user adoption needs. Top management support was the most critical thing. And we know that's the hardest to get. Because when you're dealing with top managers, they're like, wow, yes, I don't even know my password for that system. And what do you mean, 1Password? I don't know. You just tell me. Can't you just email those reports to me? That's not support. So thinking about top management support whenever you're doing, rolling out an initiative is going to be critical to whether or not what you're rolling out works. The next one, and this actually was my favorite study because I do have favorite studies, and you put out my favorite study, and this one was the impact of AI-enabled CRM systems on organizational competitive advantage. And this one is, I think, although this study is only 5 months old, it's going to be rolling out, it's going to have a large impact because every organization wants to have competitive advantage, right? So you set out to find out whether or not the research question, can an AI-enabled CRM impact an organization and make it more competitive? And the way that you did this was figuring out what the AI-enabled CRM features might be, data-driven decision-making, creative content generation, lead nurturing, conversion, same things we've been talking about with CRM for years and years. But looking at it and saying, if this CRM can be enabled by AI, and we can influence the way that that CRM is able to work by putting agents and understanding what can come next, will that allow this organization to have a higher competitive advantage? And what you came up with, the conclusion from you, is if you adopt AI without planning ahead, you won't see any positive organizational performance. It will lead to employee resistance, and so it's crucial to provide strategic guideline considering user perception and organizational performance. So once again, these pesky humans are coming into play. So thinking about change management and how the humans are going to accept it is showing up in this second research study. And then the third one, which came from Min, was thinking about AI technology adoption in a broader way, not just CRM, but in corporate IT network operations. This one's based on the TOE model, which is very similar to the one that I showed you in Disjurdy's that just had 2 extra components. So technology, organization, and environment. So if you think about that Cotter framework for change, you want to also apply these 3 things to it at least. What is the technology? What's the relative advantage? The organization, do you or do you not have that top management support? This floated through all 3 of these studies. And then what's the environment? Is there competitive pressure externally? Is there a collaborative environment internally? And how do you then translate that to the people who are going to be performing these initiatives internally, who are going to be the ones rolling it out? And then how do you share it with your users? And then, of course, this study just says, well, if you do all that, it leads to AI adoption, network operations, period, end of story. Now, I see a couple of smiles. You guys know it never ends, right? It's continuous. You just can't stop because the technology is not going to stop. So your pressure on the communication can't either. And Min's final conclusion said, companies have to have strategies and roadmaps that will help the employees who are being impacted by their AI adoption, and they have to help enhance their understanding of change. So we keep hearing these same themes. That is, humans are unpredictable and resistant to change. Top management has to be involved or nothing's going to work, and making sure that we communicate that is going to be a way that we can solidly make sure people are involved in that. So how do we do it? The final step is facilitate learning. So everybody's here today, I'm going to assume, because they wanted to learn something. Yes? Yes? Yeah? All right, some of you came for the lunch, which was delicious. I am a sucker for a good pierogi, so thank you. If you also came for the lunch, I hope you had pierogies because they were so good. So how do you facilitate that communication and that learning? And the first thing is communicate the vision. This is critical because now you've got employees that you know are fearful, they're scared. Is this taking my job? Is it changing my job? Do I still want to work here after this thing happens? So understanding they are not where you are because you've been thinking about this for quite some time and they're just learning about it. So they're almost going to go through the 12 stages of grief. So thinking about what their environment is and what your vision is and how you can coalesce the two so they understand that how will this impact me? What's in it for me? You know, why should I care about this AI initiative is going to be absolutely critical. And adult learners are finicky, they are unreliable, and they generally do not pay attention. In fact, studies say that adults who learn things will only remember 10% of the things that they are told. So when you walk away from here today, you probably will say, wow, Shannon loves pierogies. That was great. I loved learning that. That was worth it. Your users, your adult learners, they're going to have that same exact problem. Adults don't pay attention and learn in rote situations like children do. Children have to learn. They're forced to. Pedagogy is very much about sitting down and absorbing what they're told to learn. Adults have choice and they know it. So when I asked you if you too were sitting around reading research studies on Saturday night and you said no, that's because you're not choosing to. Right? Maybe you're watching The Pit on Saturdays. Maybe you're leaving your house. I don't know. But adults are choosing what they want to do. Is anybody here against their will? Blink twice. No, you're all here because you want to be. Everybody was like, Innovation Summit, that sounds incredible. And also, I have the choice of many different sessions to attend today. So you went to the one that you liked the best. Your users are the exact same way. They want to learn things that are interesting to them. So as you're thinking about change management, communication, and then learning, you want to make it appealing to them. Now you don't have to raise your hand on this one because some people may have a supervisor in the room with them, but I'm willing to bet everyone here has just let something run and then went and put in a load of laundry or surfed on their phone because they didn't want to have to watch that HIPAA training one more time. Everyone's done it, right? Because it's not exciting. It's an hour long of regulations that does not change year after year. So thinking about how you can communicate the vision and then what you think the takeaways are going to be critical for your adult learners because they are self-selecting. And knowing that we are, for the first time, having 4 generations in the workforce at the same time means we can't say, hey, these Gen Alpha people only have 90-second attention spans because they're so used to watching TikTok and that's where they get all their information, while boomers can sit in front of their computers for 2 hours and watch these trainings. So you're trying to think, how do I reach multiple different levels, layers, and ages of learners with my really important communication on what it is that we're rolling out to them? And that's worthy of consideration. And it may mean, as you're reaching that message to them, you're changing it, you're shifting it, and you're varying it in multiple different ways. Who loves a good podcast? Yeah, okay, so you guys are nerds. Podcasts generally are liked by people who love to learn audio with an audio version of learning. But I can tell you, everyone who just raised their hand and said, I love a podcast, is not going to listen to a podcast when your furnace is broken and you're trying to figure out, can you fix it yourself? You're going to switch to a video, right? So as you're thinking about your users, you're certainly not going to create a podcast to tell them how they should be clicking around in ways that will help them to do their job better. So consider the way that you're rolling out your strategies so that people will want to learn it, they will want to retain it, and it's delivered in a way that allows them to do exactly that. I'm going to leave you with something that I talk about an awful lot, and that is Everett's Diffusion of Innovations. Who remembers what decade I said all of the good organizational studies were done in? The 60s. Guess when this one's from? Oh, you betcha. It's also from the 60s, but it holds true today. So when you think about diffusion of innovations, that's essentially how our ideas spread. How are ideas spread? How do people say, I'm opting in immediately because I want to be the one to break it. I want to be that person. I want to go to the restaurant the day that it opens because I want them to serve me the wrong thing so I can let them know about it. There are people who love to say, I'm an innovator, right? When iPhones first came out, people used to sleep outside to get them. Some of you might be my age or remember sleeping outside for concert tickets, right? You want to be the first in. Those people are going to do what you tell them to no matter what because they want to try it first. So when you're thinking about your AI initiatives, you don't have to think about those people as hard because they're going to do it anyway. Now you're rolling into the early adopters. Those people are going to wait until the innovators break it, right? They don't want to get food poisoning at the new restaurant. They want you to first, and then they'll go next Tuesday. But rolling into that majority, 68% of the people sit inside of that majority, and those are the ones you really need to consider as you're thinking through the way that you're implementing change, the folks that are going to adopt your system, and how you're communicating that system to them. So as you're thinking about the way that you're going to roll that out, that middle 68% are the ones that you're basically going to be focused on. So I am going to ask if there are 2 questions. I think we have time for 2 questions. 13 minutes. All right. So what questions do you have about this simple but challenging way to enable change management in your rollouts?
So I think about early adopters a lot. And what are some examples of how you champion early adopters so it encourages the next set of users?
Love this so much. So the question is, and I did not write this one, thank you. How do you allow the early adopters to become champions so that they can help pull everybody in? And I would say absolutely deputize those people, because they will be the ones that will be in the break room or on the Zoom calls when everybody's complaining about the new initiative that can help say, I know, it was really hard for me too, but here's what I found. If you log in, squeeze your eyes, and pinch your nose, it works best that way. So telling them, hey, you're my deputy. I recognize that you've glommed onto this really quickly, so I'm going to ask you to be eyes and ears and also the person that helps to solve the problems, whether it's feature enhancements or it's bugs. Tell those people, you're on my team now. You're voluntold because you were so interested in it. So pulling those people in is really critical and a great idea. So the innovators, maybe not. Those are generally the people that are sort of like, they are flying by the seat of their pants and they don't want to follow your structure. But those early adopters, they're interested and they also will take initiative. Thank you.
I was curious in your research if you found anything like significant in terms of things that were actually totally unique for AI adoption versus all the other precedents.
Great question. So was there anything totally unique about AI adoption based on precedents that were set in other user adoption initiatives? So what I found was the word human showed up even more in AI adoption than it did in any other adoption studies that were done prior to about 2021. So when we would have thought, okay, well now we're taking some of the human out of human, we're asking for next best action, we're expecting that AI is going to solve these problems, humans are resisting it even more. The concept of AI is so stressful to humans that it's showing up more in these research studies than we've ever seen in research before. So top management support's still the same, but humans and fear, that's showing up even more now, which I think is wild and something we all have to consider.
Is there one demographic that is more resistant to this adoption than others?
Is there one demographic that is more resistant to this adoption than others? So there was nothing that was done to separate variables in terms of age. So where I think we probably all think, okay, you know, here, this age, this lowest age group, they probably are like, yes, we want AI, we want everything to do with it. But what I did find in the research is people were separated by industry. So people, particularly in healthcare, are very resistant because probably it's a heavily regulated environment. Government was called out in one of the studies as folks who were like, you just keep your AI away from our government. And that was global, you know, not just national. So thinking about the industry, I saw that represented in the research. I haven't seen anything in terms of age yet. Well, I'm curious about that one.
I'm sure like a lot of other people in this room are in the same boat I am, where if you look judging by my LinkedIn, it seems like everyone's adopting AI. Like my feed is very noisy with AI. But then when you actually get out of like your bubble, and you know, most of my friends are not in this space, they're like, what words are you using? And so then I go and I lose myself in stats, and I'm like, okay, well, where really are we on AI adoption? But then it's if you look at companies with 5,000 to 10,000 employees, it's much higher. It's this, and it's hard to get a straight answer. I think when it comes to where are we at in the AI adoption.
I love this question. And for those of you who couldn't hear it, the question was, where are we really with AI? Because if you look at LinkedIn, it seems like everyone's doing it. And if you are on Reddit, I recommend following LinkedIn Lunatics. That's my favorite subreddit. But it tells you a lot about the way people use LinkedIn. LinkedIn tells you AI is just like TLC, crazy, sexy, cool, and so everybody's gonna say they're doing it, even though most of them aren't actually doing it. So when you think about AI and whether or not people are implementing it with great big success, the reality probably is somewhere in that same space as user adoption. Companies certainly don't want to talk about it because they don't want to say we're not doing it when it feels like everybody else is. It's still nascent. It's still growing. So most organizations have some sort of AI strategy in play, but I think one of the things I love the most about the U study is it said, if you think about AI as a competitive advantage and not just AI as it's cool and everyone else is doing it, nobody gets fired for choosing IBM, but people might get fired if they don't think about how to move things forward. It's nice to think about what are the outcomes we're trying to drive to so we can make sure AI is actually in the place that we need it to be. So I totally agree. I think LinkedIn is noisy. I think everybody's playing around with AI in some way. It is definitely being driven by enterprise, that's for sure. And I think we are now in this place where people are trying to say, how will this actually impact my business, knowing that AI technology is developing and changing every single week. Gone are the days of us saying, oh, well, I can reliably say Salesforce has 3 new releases a year. We're seeing products change every single week. And so making sure that you have governance and understanding and capacity and communication is critical. And allowing yourself to say, I'm going to keep my head down from the LinkedIn lunatics and I'm going to focus on what makes sense for my organization probably will help you to plan better. That's a good question. It was vulnerable, so thank you for asking.
Yep.
Do you use AI to help in either creating or adopting or changing plans?
Love this question. So do you use AI in helping to create or evaluate change management plans? And for me, the answer is absolutely yes. I am really careful and cautious about what AI I use, and I will tell you the one that we use the most. If you don't know Brooks, if you can wave your hand, Brooks has a beautiful one that we've trained on the way that we do things, so it understands our organization and the way that we do change management. That's really what we're focused on. I love the idea of using AI to adjudicate thoughts you already have. So even my students who I will see this evening, they know AI is not a dirty word. Bring it into the classroom. But you have to have the thoughts first. So show me what your prompt was. Help me understand what your understanding was. Because if your AI is going to hallucinate and tell you the best thing to do for change management is to throw a pizza party for a bunch of senior execs to really ramp up top management support, you're going to be in pretty big trouble and you'll spend a bunch of money on pizza that's not going to get eaten. So absolutely, but my concept with change management is because it's so specific to the organization and the environment and the communication style they're used to, is to allow my AI to help say, I'm going to look for the 3 flaws and I'm going to look for the 3 things that we want to make sure can be done well. I have 90 seconds left. Okay, who here is like, yes, Shannon, now I do believe you are the biggest nerd in the room? Oh my gosh, well, only 3 of you. Okay, thanks guys. That means the rest of you are secret nerds and you didn't want to share it, but I knew you were because I looked in the Whova app. Speaking of the Whova app, make sure that you use it. I absolutely love Whova. That was one of the first apps that the first time I used it, maybe 4 years ago, I was like, oh my gosh, I could use it without anybody telling me how to use it, and I bet you had that same experience. You were able to pick it up and see the little button that said agenda, and you knew what to do. Nobody had to tell you. You press this little calendar button to tell you which agenda item you are going to be focused on. So as you're thinking about your AI initiatives, the way that you can user adoption proof it is thinking about the way that people are going to use it without you giving them a 1-hour-long video to tell them how to do it that they will never watch anyway. I would love to be connected with you on LinkedIn, where I share extremely nerdy things all of the time and try my best to stay very far away from the LinkedIn lunatics Reddit. If you guys will add me on LinkedIn, I would love to be connected with you. If you screenshot anything that I write and put it in the LinkedIn lunatics subreddit, I would love for you to also tag me in LinkedIn there. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day at the Innovation Summit.